They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That is Jose Ortiz, and this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. We appreciate you coming in and joining us from wherever and however you're listening to us and spending any part of your day with us. We're trying to make it worthwhile in terms of sports and entertainment. Hopefully an equal mix of each. We are at the start of hour two. This is hour two, and I think the new format is working out well. We kind of have broken up a little bit so we don't have super long episodes. It's a little more bite-sized and condensed versions multiple times a week instead of one giant show. I think that works better in the world that we live in today. In hour one, in case you're just tuning into hour two for some reason, we touched on a lot of news in the world of sports. Dalvin Cook's holdout, Colin Kaepernick, of course, Reggie Bush, Zion Williamson. We ranked the NFC West from top to bottom, and we can probably get that to Facebook at some point this week. And coming up in a little while, we're going to be touching on the AFC West and ranking those in order of first to worst. You can find us, by the way, on the iHeartRadio podcast app. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Jose, I'm thinking about bringing us back to MySpace to kind of go retro a little bit. I'm wondering when MySpace is going to become a retro thing where hipsters are going to start putting up. I realized today that I think I have my profile picture for my MySpace account, if it still exists, is like me and a girl that I think I dated probably 12 years ago. And she's married to someone else now. So I was thinking about that today. It was kind of interesting about how
I had
fun. We could
I
have
had
the cover
completely
of our,
forgotten about MySpace.
I think we should have the cover of our logo should just be us, our MySpace account. I think would be just fantastic and interesting to say the least. Anyway, I digress. I'm sure no other sports talk program is talking about MySpace today.
No one is talking about MySpace today.
That's how we roll on the Benchwarmerz podcast. So to start off this hour, we are celebrating the comeback of sports. It's very exciting. We have some dates set, some preliminary stuff, kind of outlines and things like that. The NHL, right off the bat, is starting. Camp starts July 10th. They don't have a set date for the season to start, but they're starting up. They've told us right from the playoffs. And I'm not a huge regular season NHL fan, but I think NHL playoffs is a fantastic watch, and it's electric atmosphere. So I'm excited for that. UFC, by the way, has four fights set in July. They also bought an island, Fight Island, which is amazing.
I want to be Dana White so badly. Like, he's so awesome to me because he's rich and he's kind of badass, and I just love everything he said. I'm just like, yes, Dana White, let's go.
Yeah, and he's so aggressive. I mean, I just love it. He's like, okay, well, you won't sanction us there? Fine, I'll buy my own island and we'll fight there. Cool. Which, hats off to you, Dana White. You're doing a fantastic job. And then the MLS is coming back too. They're doing a World Cup style tournament. There's going to be a group play. It's going to be 54 matches, 26 teams, 6 groups, and it's going to go from July 8th to August 11th, I think.
Yep.
And so that is exciting. Anything World Cup style, is just going to be electrifying. It's going to be magnetic for fans everywhere. And MLS, again, the same thing with NHL is it's not my first sport that I tune in for, but if it's the only thing on, you better believe I'm going to be tuning in. So, and finally, that brings us to kind of an issue that I had, and I teased this at the beginning of the hour, last hour. I have a problem with Major League Baseball, and I'm going to go on kind of a rant here, Jose, so bear with me for a second, but it bothers me on multiple levels, because I was a baseball fan before I was anything. I had to be. My family was Yankees fans. I would have been kicked out of my family if I wasn't a Yankees fan. So I grew up watching baseball. I tried playing baseball. I was terrible at baseball, but I liked watching it. Baseball it's coined America's pastime. I mean, it's a game invented by America for America, and it's the great national pastime, right? So baseball they missed, and they continue to miss, a golden opportunity. There was another proposal that this this ongoing dispute, this labor dispute between the players and the owners, is just it's sad. It should not be televised. It shouldn't be publicized. And truthfully, in a depressed economy, the last thing, even in a good economy, the last thing that I want to hear are billionaires arguing with millionaires about who isn't making any money. Okay, so just let's put a little perspective, have a little bit of perspective. And I don't care if you're the players trying to get fan support and saying, oh no, they're only paying us 70%. Yeah, 70% of Mike Trout's $430 million contract. Yeah, I'll take it. You don't want it? Give it to me. I'll take it. I can do a lot of good with it. And the same thing with billionaires. Oh, we're losing $500,000 at the gate every game we play. So okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you have at least $500,000 in the bank, right? Okay, so let's just maybe keep quiet about that too. And then the ongoing, we don't want this. The owners don't want a lot of games, and then the fans or the players want, first they came in with 100. I think it was 118 games or something to that effect. But then in the same breath, they're saying, well, but we're concerned about our health. So if you're concerned about your health, wouldn't playing more games put you at more risk? And so again, you're kind of talking on both sides of your mouth. But the bigger overall thing, and I'm going to make a prediction right now. I think that because of this entire month of July, I think that MLS is going to overtake Major League Baseball as the official third sport. I don't think it's going to be football, basketball, baseball anymore. And the alliteration is nice, but I think it's going to be football, basketball, and MLS. And baseball they're so short-sighted with this. And if you think about what they had, think of the opportunity they had from not just your petty squabbling day-to-day prorated salary, not prorated salary, 70%, 80% of what we're making today. You had a captive audience of the NFL draft got 55 million people, and that wasn't even a sporting event. It was a draft about a sporting event. So you have the potential to have 50, 60, who knows how many million people captive watching a game that under normal circumstances gets a lot of flack for being too long. It would be a heralded godsend to be able to sit in front of the television for 3 hours and watch a live sporting event to see people play. And baseball would have had parents, they would have had an entire generation of children who would be just giddy over watching baseball players. You could have an entire new, so you're squabbling about these millions of dollars that the theoretical money that you're not making. And by doing so, you're costing yourselves, both owners and players, incalculable amounts of money by being petty, short-sighted idiots about this. And you could have showcased your entire sport, your entire talent. You could have started on 4th of July. America's pastime could have started on America's birthday, and you couldn't write a better script than that. And you would have owned all of July. And instead, you want to complain and argue and bitch and moan. And because of that, Major League Soccer is going to take over and going to be the number 3 sport in America. And my rant is over. I'm sorry for taking up so much time, Jose. Please tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything, and I feel corny. Like I want to have some opposing point and be like, "Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong." The only thing, picture this: it's July 4th. The family's getting together. Everyone's probably still slightly quarantined, but you have you have your family together. You have a barbecue going. You have a slate of 3, 4. Actually, we probably have every team in baseball playing that day, and then you have the entire, like you said, a captive audience. Everyone just can't wait. I mean, I know I'm a sports addict. I can't wait to be able to watch some live competition, and they blew it. Every year there are young boys and girls who are coming of age in a sense where there's maybe their first year really being aware of sports. You and I were reliving it when we were watching the Bulls documentary, where we say, when I was 9 years old, I was 10 years old. I remember this was the first time I watched the Jordan. When I became a 49ers fan, it was because the first game I remember watching was the 1989 Super Bowl in which the 49ers defeated the Broncos 55-10. I became a 49ers fan for life from that point on.
Right.
This is what they could have had happen this July. And they decided to say, you know what? And I don't really know who to blame here, so I'm blaming them both. for being, as you
It's
said,
both.
extremely
It's both.
short-sighted. You're talking about money you're losing. How about the money you're gaining by owning the entire month of July? Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you that Major League Soccer is going to take over as the number 3 sport in baseball, because I do think that baseball is going to have some sort of season. I do think they're going to have whatever 50 games. But let's say that if we were rating them, let's say football's a 10, basketball's an 8, baseball's a 7, and Major League Soccer is a 3. Well, Major League Soccer might move up to 5, and maybe baseball moves down to 6 or 5.5. And so now, if nothing else, the gap is closing. I was just thinking to myself, I don't really know anything about Major League Soccer. We're going to have to be prepared to maybe at least talk casually about Major League Soccer. And this is something that I'm not going to have any choice but to do, because there's going to be nothing else on. I'm excited to watch NHL hockey when it comes back. I'm excited to watch UFC and boxing. And I would have been excited. We would have been breaking down the teams. We would have been talking about the players. It would have been amazing. And baseball's, they're worried about, the players are worried about not getting 30% of their income for a shortened season, when, I mean, in fairness to the owners, it's understandable. You're not going to have any fans in the stands. It seems like a decent compromise to me. It's somewhere, either you have fewer games or you're getting a not fully prorated salary. That seems like a fair deal. And the fact that they couldn't get this done, and even worse, the fact that they keep playing it out in the media. I don't want to hear anything from Major League Baseball till they say we have a deal done and this is when we're starting. That's the next time I want to hear from them. It's so frustrating. Okay, well, first there was a 114 game. Then they came back with an 89 game. Then they came back with a 52 game. Then they came back with a 48 game. Now they're up to 72 games. I don't care. Just tell me when the season is starting so I can plan to watch. And now I've kind of got a bad taste in my mouth. And I will say this. If Major League Soccer, if their tournament is great and you get great play and there's some players that you can kind of get behind and they do a good job of marketing, you might be right. You might be right in the sense that they take over, especially because baseball does such a terrible job of marketing their players. You would think that this is if nothing else, this is a golden opportunity. They've left the door open when the door should not have been open at all. So
yeah, I agree, and I think there's a couple things off of that where you look at a guy. I mean, you look at a guy like we were talking about this earlier. Mike Trout is like the second coming of Mickey Mantle. If you look at his numbers and his stats and how good he is on a team that just can't get out of its own way. But you could showcase Aaron Judge, you could showcase Mike Trout, you could showcase Bryce Harper. I mean, you put these faces on the TV and people can see them you can see talent when you're watching a game and you're paying attention. You can discern who's good and who's not. And a guy like Mike Trout would benefit immeasurably with a thing like that.
Yeah, and you'd have, because there's tiers of fans. You have you and I who are mega fans. We would watch anything that's on right now, literally, and we're watching old games just to get some sports going on. So we were going to watch anyway. And then you have casual fans who maybe baseball isn't their number one sport. Maybe they're a basketball fan. Maybe they're a football fan. There's nothing else on. So you know what? I'm bored. I'm home. There's baseball in the daytime too as well. So there's day games. I'm home. Let me throw on a game and watch it. They've lost that opportunity because now by the time they come back, we're going to be in the middle of the NBA playoffs, which is much more relevant than the regular season of baseball, which I don't have to tell you that. And then there's going to be, NFL training camp. There's going to be all these, and then Major League Soccer. I mean, who knows how their tournament's going to go? It could be really exciting, and I know I'm going to watch. So yeah, I mean, just not to keep belaboring the point, they missed the golden opportunity to make more money than they think they're losing, and really to win lifelong fans, or to convert, impressionable young minds like I was when I was 9 years old and I became a 49ers fan. They lost the opportunity to have that happen to millions of children around the country.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify. I think that I think that MLS is going to overtake baseball. I think it's going to take a little while, but I think the seeds of that takeover have been planted with this month, with this new generation of people. Whoever's first, I don't understand why sports aren't paying more attention to this. Whoever's back first has an audience that is starving. We're emaciated because we haven't been fed our sports our sports intake, and we're dying for. I'll watch the Bundesliga soccer. I'll watch NASCAR, like things I've never watched. But I'll watch the Charles Schwab Open or whatever it is this week.
People watch Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning and Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady play golf. I'm not sure what the ratings were on that, but I'm sure it was pretty high. And just to build off of your point of Major League Soccer and planting the seeds, I'm pretty sure the World Cup is next year. So to kind of have this almost like an appetizer, where maybe even some of the players who are in Major League Soccer might be on some of these World Cup teams. I don't know enough about the teams to make that prediction, but it wouldn't be unrealistic that there could be some players who on a Major League Soccer squad that might have a national team that they're playing for the World Cup. And so the Major League Soccer is going to be able to take this excitement that they get from this tournament, which is perfect, and basically over 50 games in about the course of a month. You can't get more exciting than that. It's basically like March Madness, and because I call it July Madness, I guess. And then they're going to be able translate that excitement and build off the World Cup next year. It's just a perfect scenario for Major League Soccer, and Major League Baseball blew it.
And I think that they would have, the owners are complaining about not making money at the gate. I mean, showcasing your game to these kids, what do you think kids are going to want to do as soon as we're able to go back out and participate in the world again? They're going to want to go to a ballpark. You're going to want to go to see the game that you've been sitting home captivated by for the last month in your house quarantined. It's so short for all of these tremendous business-minded billionaire people who own these. It is flabbergasting.
And I can't imagine the advertising. You'd have to be able to go up on the advertising cost.
Yes.
Knowing that you have more fans at home and more reasons to watch, I can't imagine that you wouldn't be able to get away with charging more for a live baseball game. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And as a side note, maybe it would maybe lower some of the prices at the ballpark, and you'll get more people in, by the way. So and sort of a side note, do you have a favorite stadium baseball game food between all the things? There's hot dog, hamburger, pretzels, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, what if they still make those?
I'm a kind of a simple guy. I like just a hot dog. I like a hot dog and a beer. It's kind of how I like to go. I also like French fries.
$47 worth of food.
Yeah. Basically, that's probably why I only get one hot dog. It's basically hot dogs $12, the beer is $16, French fries are $10, and the next thing you know, you spend like $70 on one meal. So but I think I'm a hot dog guy.
I go. It's funny. I don't really eat hot dogs or pretzels anywhere, but for some reason, especially Yankee Stadium, the dirty water dogs or whatever they call them there, they are the best hot dogs I've ever had in any part of this world ever. And maybe it's because I'm starving, maybe it's because I have to convince myself that they're really good because they're so expensive. But hot dog all the way with some mustard and a pretzel, and I am a happy camper at a baseball game. But not that any of the owners would know that, because they're not letting me back in to prove it to them. And the last point I'll make about this, and I want to kind of bring this up, is, by the way, this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That's Jose Ortiz. You can send your agreements or hate mail either on Facebook, or you can find us on Instagram, or email us at the Benchwarmerz podcast at yahoo.com. Benchwarmers with a Z. So the last thing I'll say about the baseball issue that's going on is that if you remember the last time that there was a strike, because it seems like now that a strike, a month ago, I would have never even thought. I don't think anybody would have been like, no, of course, baseball would obviously come back because this is the greatest opportunity they're ever going to have to be relevant again. But now it looks like if this keeps going back and forth, unless someone comes to their senses, or the commissioner plays mediator and just says, okay, you guys over there shut up, and you guys over there shut up, and here's what we're going to do, and this is in the middle, so we're doing it. There could be a strike. There could be another baseball strike. And if you remember the last time, and we were young at the time, but in the strike of 1994 destroyed baseball. I mean, baseball did not come back until 1990. It took 4 years for baseball to really be rejuvenated. And it took an era of performance-enhancing drugs and two dudes, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, to battle for the home run title and record. And it was horrible. It destroyed baseball, and we're looking at now that happening again, but even worse, because now MLS and UFC are going to swoop in and go, all right, well, baseball is regional to begin with, and we can't go almost 2 full years without seeing a baseball game. And the last baseball game we saw was people trying to cheat in the World Series to win. Thankfully the Nationals won, but the Astros were trying. That's the last thing we remember is a bunch of cheaters on the field trying to win a game. So baseball, they have to come to their senses. You just have to. It's you can't have another strike, because this time around, I don't know that they're going to be able to come back from it.
Well, there's so much more competition. The UFC didn't exist. Major League Soccer didn't exist in 1994. Baseball, if you think about it, in 1994, I don't even think the NFL was the top sport. I think baseball probably was the top sport at the time. It's hard for me to go all the way back in time, but this NFL being the king of American sports is more of a 20th century thing. 21st century thing than it was in the late 90s. So yeah, you're right. If they go on strike, there's just way too many options. There's way too many other things for people to do other than watch baseball for them to be able to survive something like that. It would be a devastating blow to the sport.
Yeah, and speaking of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, there's actually a documentary coming out this week, which I'm going to check out. I don't know if you're going to watch it, but I think it's called Summer of '98. It's about McGwire Sosa, the home run chase, and I'll be watching it. I cannot wait to watch. I'm so excited. So maybe we'll touch on that next week. But all right, Jose, I'm exhausted. We need a break. We're up against the clock. So this is my first official rant on the Benchwarmerz podcast. I'm proud to have gotten it out of the way. I'm sorry it was at the hands of baseball, but I wish somebody would listen and maybe take some of our advice. But in any event, we're going to take a break, and we're going to talk about a sport that is coming back, and the NFL, and we're going to touch on the last division we have left, the AFC West. We're going to rank them from first to worst and give you some reasons why. So stick around. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is the Benchwarmers podcast, and we'll be right back.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Now available on iHeartRadio and Spotify. This is the Benchwarmers podcast. Here's Lou and Jose.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That is Jose Ortiz, and this is the Benchwarmers podcast. We are rounding out our number 2. We've had quite a show so far. If you missed the first hour of the show, we touched on some news, some headlines. Dalvin Cook, Colin Kaepernick, Reggie Bush, Zion Williamson. We ranked the NFC West, which truthfully wasn't that hard to do. At the beginning of this hour, we talked a little bit about the comeback of sports, and mostly about how idiotic Major League Baseball has become and how much they've actually cost both themselves and us as fans in this ongoing dispute. But finally, Jose, we're rounding out the show with ranking the AFC West, which is a reasonably easy, also an easy division for the most part, at least in the beginning of it, to rank from first to worst. And you can see our rankings from previous shows. You can go and find us on iTunes. We're on Google Play. We're on YouTube. We're on iHeartRadio podcasting app. We are on Spotify. I think I said YouTube already, but you can find us and go check out our shows. There's captions of what we've discussed on those shows, and you can see our rankings also on our Facebook page. So we've done all the divisions thus far, and this is the last of the last divisions. And the AFC West, Jose, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we probably both have the Kansas City Chiefs winning the division in 2020. And I'm just going to this is sort of a lob over the plate, so I'm going to, between Patrick Mahomes, Damian Williams, they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tyreek Hill, the most explosive player in the league. They also have Mecole Hardman, by the way, who might be the second fastest player in the league behind Tyreek Hill. And then, oh, by the way, they still have Sammy Watkins, who everyone forgot about, who is a pretty stellar wide receiver. And actually, happy belated birthday to Sammy Watkins, by the way. He had his birthday this week on the 13th. And then they might have the best tight end in the league in Travis Kelce. So it's just, even if they had me and you on defense, their offense is going to be so prolific that there's who's stopping them? No one's stopping them.
Yeah, I wanted to have this nice narrative and breakdown for the Kansas City Chiefs and why they're the best team in the division. There's nothing else to say. They have the best quarterback in the game. They have one of the best head coaches in the game. They have the best tight end in the game. They have one of the best wide receivers in the game. And, oh, yeah, they had just drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who Patrick Mahomes hand-selected to be his pick. They said, who do you want us to draft? They said, draft this guy. So you know how good that team is going to be. And honestly, their defense was middle of the pack last year, and that's fine. When you have an offense that's that good, you don't need to be this. You don't have to have this amazing world-beating defense. Now, if their defense suddenly takes a step forward, look out. You might have one of the best teams in NFL history. But right now, if you had to handicap, I don't see how you could pick anyone else other than the Kansas City Chiefs as the favorites to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of belaboring the point, so I'm not even going to bother. So I think after the Kansas City Chiefs, though, I think it gets a little
muddier.
It gets a little dicier.
Yep.
in who we have coming up as the number 2. So I'm gonna let you go first, because I'm not sure. If we agree on this, I'm gonna be shocked. I mean, I will be shocked, but I won't be shocked. So who you have as the runner-up in the AFC West?
So I just want to say that I went back and forth on this a lot because I think it's tough to kind of separate these teams. In the end, I went with continuity, and I put the Raiders as the second team in the division. Doesn't necessarily mean I think that they're going to win a lot of games. I just look at the Raiders, through 10 games last season, the Raiders were 6-4. We forget that they were a decent team for most of the season last year. Then through a horrific 4-game stretch, they lost 4 in a row, gave up 136 points over that span, and basically killed their playoff chances. They lost 5 of the last 6 games. They weren't an awful team, but they weren't a great team. And I feel like at the end of last year, I thought they needed to address their defense. They didn't do that. They did get a former Pro Bowler in Corey Littleton at linebacker. And on offense, the team has some promise with Josh Jacobs. They drafted Henry Ruggs. I really, really love Brian Edwards. Darren Waller looks like a solid tight end, maybe one of the best in the chance to be a top 5 tight end. But I'm just not sure who Derek Carr is. I was looking at Derek Carr. I was surprised that he's a 3-time Pro Bowler. I was like, really? He's a 3-time Pro Bowler? And then I had to look back. He's had an MVP caliber season in 2016 until he broke his leg. It just doesn't seem like he's been the same player since he's come back from that injury. At one point, he looked like a future star. He had a decent year in 2019, but it still felt underwhelming. On defense, the Raiders, just to go back to defense really, they gave up the 3rd most points in the AFC. So that's going to be a problem for them. I just think they're going to be kind of a middle-of-the-pack team, an 8-win team, 9-win team. 9 is probably the ceiling. The reason I have them at second place is because I think their range of outcomes, the Broncos, Drew Lock is even less proven than Derek Carr, and the Chargers, I don't know what to expect with Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert. So to me, it just felt like from a continuity standpoint, a team that was okay through the first 10 games last season, it seems like they have a chance to maybe do something and win a few games. But honestly, I'm not really. This is one of those rankings that I'm just not very confident in. I had the Broncos here initially at first, and then I moved the Raiders back over them, and then I moved the Chargers up. So at this point, I have the Raiders number 2, just the way I feel at this moment.
All right. Interesting. So I'm gonna call my shot here. I think that the Broncos are going to be the second best team in the AFC West next year, and I don't say that with 100% confidence, but they strike me as a team on the rise for a lot of reasons, and they have they had a good running back core to begin with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, and then by the way, they added Melvin Gordon, so now they have this 3-headed monster at running back. Cortland Sutton was an okay wide receiver. They lost they lost Emmanuel Sanders last year, but Jerry Jeudy, I think, in their first-round draft pick, I think Jerry Jeudy might be the best receiver in the draft this last year. I think Jerry Jeudy has a chance to be like Julio Jones level good. And maybe it's also the alliteration and the same initials that helps that too. But let's not forget Noah Fant is a spectacular tight end. I think he's super underrated last year. And they're a defensive minded team that they actually have offensive talent. Now Drew Lock is going to be the wild card here. And Drew Lock at the end of, he started for after Joe
Flacco.
I don't know. I completely just forgot his name. That's how fast I forgot.
Okay, I was like, wait, we're talking about. You actually had me wondering, like, wait, is Joe Flacco on that team? I completely forgot about it.
He was, but then Drew Lock was the starter for the last half of the season.
Last 5 games.
He went 4-1. By the way, he had 1 comeback and 2 game-winning drives. By the way, he had a 64% completion ratio. I mean, he threw for 1,000 yards in 5 games, which is pretty good. 3 interceptions, 7 touchdowns. So but in any event, as being thrown into the fray, I think that he held his own pretty well, and especially compared to if you look at obviously Patrick Mahomes only started 1 game his freshman year or whatever rookie year, but Drew Lock looks like he has a lot of potential, and he's going to be the hinge that all of this rides on. And so I think that it's interesting. I think it's a little bit of a gamble, but I think that the Denver Broncos are going to be second best in the AFC West.
Yeah, so the Denver Broncos, when I made my list out, I initially had the Denver Broncos as my second team, and I went back and forth between the Raiders and the Broncos over and over again. I think the ceiling for the Broncos is higher than the ceiling for the Raiders. So if both teams play as well as they possibly can, I think the Broncos end up being better. But my worry is with Drew Lock, kind of going into the second year, we don't know what to expect from him from a larger sample size. Maybe there's too many mouths to feed in the backfield. It's going to be hard to get any sort of consistency. I just worried that the floor was lower with the Broncos, that they could end up being much worse than the Raiders. And so, but there's a lot to feel good about with the Broncos. You already mentioned Melvin Gordon. I think it was an unnecessary signing, but still certainly strengthens their backfield. Jerry Jeudy, they're pairing him with Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton was already a good to great wide receiver. Now you're adding Jerry Jeudy to the other side. Noah Fant, the first-round pick last year, had a 75-yard touchdown catch last season, there's probably only 2 or 3 tight ends in the NFL that can make that type of catch, so he's a beast. They added A.J. Bouye, a Pro Bowler in the corner, and then they added 5-time Pro Bowler Jarrell Casey on defense as well. So I think they have the chance to take a big jump this year. I'm just very worried about Drew Lock. You said he played in 5 games last year. I wasn't blown away by his numbers, but again, it's only 5 games. He wasn't drafted to be, like from what I saw, he was a second-round pick last year, so maybe he was drafted to be a future starter. I just think he just got kind of thrown in there, and he won some games. I don't really like to attach wins to players too much, although I did do that earlier in last hour with Russell Wilson. But I just think there's too much uncertainty at the quarterback, and so just as a conservative play, I put the Broncos at 3rd place. But I could easily see them being second, easily.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. In 3rd place, I actually have the Los Angeles Chargers. They'll forever be the San Diego Chargers to me.
Yep.
And here's why. I think that from top to bottom, the talent, the skill positions for the Chargers are amazing. Offense, defense. They have Austin Eckler might be the best receiving running back in the league. They have Justin Jackson. They drafted a running back from UCLA in Josh Kelly in round 4. So they're trying to make up for the loss of Melvin Gordon. But then they have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams as their starting wideouts, who are, you have to think for a while to get a better starting wide receiver combination. There are a couple that are better, in my opinion, but they're pretty good. And then don't forget Hunter Henry when he can stay healthy. He's a stellar tight end. And then, oh, by the way, you still have Joey Bosa, who is a perennial defensive player of the year on the back end, along with Melvin Ingram, who are just a dynamic duo of destruction. And so, but the problem is, with all that talent, you have Tyrod Taylor as your starter, and Tyrod Taylor is a serviceable quarterback. He's proven, when he was on the Bills, he was on the Browns for a little while. I mean, he's proven that he's about, if you had to make a Mendoza line for mediocrity in the NFL, I think Tyrod Taylor is the line that you draw. He's not good, but he's not bad either. He's right in the middle. And then you
think he's better than Phillip Rivers? Just sorry to interrupt you. Do you think he's better than Phillip Rivers right now?
I mean, I think compared to what Phillip Rivers was last season, I think you would be better than Phillip Rivers, because some of the interceptions that he threw last year were just so crazy. And watching those games, I mean, he had a game, I think, against it was a Monday night, I think, against the Steelers, and the Steelers with a backup quarterback made the Chargers look stupid on national television. And so Tyrod Taylor, I think, he's more mobile, obviously. I mean, Phillip Rivers is about as mobile as a lawn chair. And as far as accuracy, I mean, if this was 2 years ago, I would say Phillip Rivers by far, but I'm not sold on Rivers at all. And then you have Justin Herbert, who's waiting in the wings, by the way. And granted, he might turn out to be a phenomenal quarterback, but there's going to be some struggling early on. Even if he gets in week 2, he's going to struggle. It's just unless he is just so magical. But we haven't really seen a rookie quarterback just take over in their rookie season without serious help. And then, I don't think Easton Stick as their backup is going to do much by way of helping anybody. So it's just the talent is there, except at the most important position. And I think that's going to be what holds back the Chargers in 2020. And that's why I have them third on the list of AFC West rankings for me.
So obviously I had the Chargers fourth. And the way I looked at it is this. They won 5 games last year. I know that Derwin James was out, and he's a great safety, one of the best safeties in the game. But you win 5 games. Phillip Rivers was not great last season, but he wasn't awful. I mean, I'm looking at his numbers right now. He had 20 touchdowns. No, I'm sorry, 23 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. That's not great, but he did have 4,600 yards passing. He wasn't a horrible quarterback. He had 88.5 rating, which isn't too bad. I don't see them improving with either Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert at the quarterback position. I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched all the film on Justin Herbert and I know how good or bad he is. I imagine that last year Phillip Rivers probably better than this year Tyrod Taylor or this year Justin Herbert. And so basically, being that all the other players are the same, and you mentioned you mentioned all the players I don't have to go through, but Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, they've got Austin Eckler, they've got a solid offense, they've got players on defense. I don't see how they get higher than 5 wins based on they didn't really make any big improvements on the offensive line. I guess they did sign Brian Bulaga, but they're a work in progress. I don't need to belabor the point here anymore. The loss of Phillip Rivers and not necessarily upgrading on that position, I don't see how they get better than 5 wins.
Yeah, which leaves me for last, the Las Vegas Raiders I have in last place. And truthfully, I don't have a lot of reasons, like tangible reasons, to explain why I think the Raiders are going to come in last place. I mean, they had a hot start last year, and there was all this talk of them getting in the playoffs, and then they just fell off a cliff. And they did travel more miles than anybody else. I think they didn't play a home game. I think it was a full month between home games last year, and they just got kind of the shaft when it came to the scheduling. But they do have talent. I mean, Henry Ruggs was their number 1 pick. He looks phenomenal. Tyrell Williams is, now that he's it looks like he's going to be a number 2 to Ruggs. I mean, Tyrell Williams is a 1A or a high end 2. Darren Waller is an amazing tight end. And then they tacked on Jason Witten, who is good at catching the ball and falling down, but he can catch the ball. But then they have Hunter Renfrow, Nelson Aguilar, and Zay Jones. So it's a pretty steep cliff they fall off of after those first couple wide receivers.
Yeah.
And then Josh Jacobs is amazing. I mean, the offensive line I think the Raiders offensive line is the heaviest average weight in the NFL. And I don't have the number in front of me, but I know that they're the biggest offensive line. So Josh Jacobs, I mean, he looks like the real deal. I think that he was a steal for John Gruden in the draft when they got him. But they, defensively, they kind of let down. They were a letdown last year. They didn't really impress me with much. They have Prince Amukamara on as a starting cornerback who is, he was good on the Giants. I'm not sure that he's
okay.
He's okay, yeah, and I don't see a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And then the biggest problem is Derek Carr to me, because especially since signing Marcus Mariota as their backup, I don't know that there's a huge difference between Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. I know statistically Derek Carr obviously had a much better season because Marcus Mariota wasn't really starting after Ryan Tannehill took over for him last year. But Derek Carr, just for whatever it is that Russell Wilson has, Derek Carr doesn't. And he can put up stats. He almost reminds me of Rich Gannon is the last Raider that he reminds me of, where he can put up these prolific stats, but when it's clutch and it's time to win, I don't know that if I was a teammate of Derek Carr's, I'm not sure that I would feel confident in him being my quarterback. I can't verbalize, I can't give you a tangible reason why. It's just something about the eye test where I don't think John Gruden is sold on him. I think he's too good to cut, but he's not good enough to make that next step. And just there's a continuity issue, I think, overall. It's an issue of continuity. I don't see this team being able to gel, and that's kind of the biggest reason why I think they're going to be in last place.
So two things. I do think Derek Carr is better than Marcus Mariota, but I do understand what you're saying, and I think as you were talking about it, it kind of crystallized in my head. Quarterbacks like Tom Brady, I guess past Tom Brady, Drew Brees, you mentioned Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes. These are guys where if you're down by 10 points in the fourth quarter, you can say to these, go win me a game, right? You need quarterback, these upper echelon quarterbacks. These guys can go out there and make something happen. They play above the defense. The defense is game planning for them, doing all this stuff. They're able to break outside of whatever the defense is doing and still make something happen. Derek Carr to me is a quarterback that kind of needs it set up for him, and he's not the guy who's elevating the play and say, hey, we're down 10 points. We saw, I hate to compare him against Patrick Mahomes because he's the best in the game, but we saw it last year in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes made plays when they needed him to make plays, and it was just if you don't have that quarterback like that, then you just have a guy who's okay. You look at his numbers: 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year. That's not bad, but it's not great. It's nothing exciting, nothing to get giddy about. Year before that, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Year before that, 22 touchdowns, 20 and 13 interceptions. These are okay numbers, but these aren't game-changing MVP level numbers that we see from some of the better quarterbacks in the game. And Derek Carr just doesn't seem like the guy who's going to go out there and win you a game. And to your point about them, although I did pick the Raiders to be in second place, if you look at their schedule, I was just going to bring it up here. They have a pretty tough start to the season. So week 1, Carolina Panthers, you would expect that to be a win. Week 2, New Orleans Saints, that's a loss. Week 3, New England Patriots, probably a loss. Week 4, Buffalo Bills, probably a loss. Week 5, Kansas City Chiefs, probably a loss. Week 6 is a bye. Week 7, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, probably a loss.
Yeah.
Week 8, Cleveland Browns, I don't know, probably a loss. That's a toss-up. So by the time they get to the Los Angeles Chargers in Week 9, you're looking at a team that might be 1-6, 2-5, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to recover from that because in the middle of the season you're dealing with injuries. There's all these different things that you're not at your full strength. It's so important to get off to a good start in the NFL. And I just don't see with that schedule them getting off to a good start. That said, I believe in the talent. I believe in the continuity. I do think Derek Carr is probably the second best quarterback in that division. So, and I just not saying much, but I do think he's probably the second best quarterback in that division. And so I just believe that the Raiders are a team that's progressing. They were under John Gruden the first year, didn't go very well. Last year, they did much better, and I expect this year that they'll probably be a fringe. No, they're not going to. I don't see them making the postseason, but I think they'll win around 8 to 9 games. I could see it.
All right, so just to recap, in the AFC West standings, I have the Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, Raiders, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have Chiefs, Raiders, Broncos, Chargers, right? Yeah, just making sure. So we're going to see. I mean, we're going to note these. We do reserve the right with these rankings to revisit this entire scenario at one time before the season starts. And, if there's any catastrophic injuries or any major changes, then we will have one more chance to kind of reevaluate and maybe reorder some of our rankings.
Or we come to our senses,
Or,
that too.
you come around and realize that the Raiders are going to be terrible, and then maybe it's fine. Watch some Derek Carr highlights if you can find them. So that'll do it for this show. Next week, we are going to continue on with this theoretical season in the NFL. We're going to be talking about the strongest and weakest divisions that we think the NFL will have next year. We're going to go into our playoff teams, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. And obviously, these are all predictions, and we're going to kind of note them and make sure that we are able to revisit them later on so we can either laugh at ourselves or cheer and rub it in everybody's faces that we were right and we actually know what we're talking about. One of those two things for sure is going to happen. So that'll do it for this episode of the Benchwarmerz podcast. Jose, good show. Once again, you can find us on the iHeartRadio podcasting app. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can email us at thebenchwarmerzpodcast@yahoo.com, Benchwarmers with a Z. So that'll do it for Jose Ortiz. I am Lou Ruggieri. This has been the Benchwarmers podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.